Welcome to the Purpose for Life podcast. I'm Suzanne Roberts, your host. I'm the author of It's Deeper Than That and the founder of The Great Reconnection. And I'm thrilled to have with us today, I think you all are going to be very delighted listening. I have Nick Loise, an Italian. I figured that out, here with us today. And I'm so excited to have you here and to hear from you today. Thank you.
Well, Suzanne, thank you first off for doing this podcast. It's a yeoman's work. Getting this. You are a great interviewer. You like bringing cool people on. I'm just appreciative to be part of all this, and thank you for doing it. Right, because it's not easy, and it's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes, and you and your team are phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I'm going to ask you an opening question. What do you think for us to be human and human beings, what do you think is possible for us on our journey?
That's a great opening question. And I think that so much is possible. And there's so much that we could do in each individuals. And you hear stories of people that all the odds are stacked against them, but they kind of fight through it. And what pains me, and listen, I got a finger going up, I got four going back, is how much we leave in the tank, right? And no, and we kind of want to live a full life, an empty life. George Bernard Shaw, says, I don't want to just live a mediocre life. I want to be fully used up by the end of the day.
Mhm.
And I'm probably botching that quote, but it's meant with honor to honor him. And I think that's the one thing I want people to realize is that we have so much more to offer. And yeah, there's good days and there's bad days and there's days that we're just fighting to get through it and just to be positive people or just to make a positive impact. But we could do so much more. And sometimes we just kind of hold ourselves back. And as you kind of just read what others, have accomplished, sometimes this phone is horrible, right? We compare ourselves to others, and let's stop doing that and let's just play our own game and race our own race and just give back, because we have all been bestowed with gifts, whether that's a gift of interviewing like you have, and you've got a great voice for it and great demeanor for it, or the gift of writing that so many people have, or whatever that gift is. Let's just figure out how to use it for the betterment of society, because it's easy to get tied into the negativity, but I don't believe in it. I think we're all better than that.
We're better than being tied into the negativity.
I think we are. I think we're better than that as humans. We
And
didn't get placed here to be negative, to not use our gifts. And so it's our duty and our responsibility to figure those out, nurture them, make them better and better every day, but give back.
how do you, Nick, know your own gifts? And how do you find a way to use your gifts for the betterment of humanity?
So I think there's certain gifts that you have that when you do it, you just feel joy or you feel
Mm.
like you're floating, right? And for me, sometimes it's training, right? Or educating, or I'm in the sales field, so it's selling or marketing. And you could get lost in doing it. And you just kind of, I'm just doing it. Sometimes it feels like autopilot, but it's not because it's your true gift. And I think there are other tasks that I do that are drudgery, right? I feel like I have a 100-pound weight on me when I'm doing them. And that's not something I was meant to do. Maybe I have to do it, right? To get to the good stuff or the fun stuff. But I think when you're doing what you know you're supposed to be doing, it's just there's it, there's nothing holding you back and you feel that energy, you feel that light.
And what is it about training that makes you feel alive?
Well, I think it's more of the education versus the
Okay.
training. And I think as you go through life, you pick up a body of knowledge, right? And there's good and bad, and you've learned, and by trial and error, then you learn by studying and giving that back because you just want people to be better, right? I mean, the world of sales has been phenomenal to me. And so I just want to give back because I think if done right, it could open up so much for some people. That's why I just enjoy doing it.
Help me understand. For some people, sales is a dirty word. Help
Yeah.
me understand sales in a positive light that would be inspiring for our listeners.
Well, I agree with you, and I can't understand why. Now, some of it I feel is that the people have been in a situation where they've had a really bad salesperson interact with them, right? So they've got that stigma attached to them. Other times, I think people think sales is manipulation. But, if I go back to just the parenthood, right? You're selling your children on a better life and a life that's, made with choices and the right choices, right? So that's the basics of selling. If I go into the day-to-day commerce, right? We've been trading since the dawn of time, right?
Mm.
Maybe I was a farmer and you were a hunter and we traded, or you were a craftsman or artisan or a leather maker, right? So we've been trading our entire lives. And I think sales is just that, right? So since the dawn of time, we've walked through the marketplace and exchanged, right? Time, money, goods for other time, money, and goods. And that's what sales is. And so if I'm doing it properly and I'm having a good conversation with you and I really understand what your goals are, and whatever that product or service that I have can help you get to that goal, it's now become my duty, my responsibility to make sure that you see that and make sure that you see the value of investing, but also the value of implementation. Because sometimes we think sales is a bad word because we've bought stuff and we haven't implemented it. We've purchased goods or services or information and haven't take action. And we can't be mad at ourselves because that's how humans are wired. So we get mad at the salesperson or the marketer or the company that we bought the products and services for. So I think one is the execution of it, doing it right. When it's done right, it's done, with love. And admiration and hope for the other person. But it's really, we really have to kind of spend some time doing that. So it's got a bad stigma and people don't like it and business owners don't like it. But I'm like, well, if you've got a product or service that we have to get out to the world, we have to figure out how we get that out. And sometimes that is that you have to become a salesperson.
What I find interesting is what you started with, though. You said, I need to find out what you need. So it's
Yeah.
relational. And I think sometimes people in sales forget human connection. I think starting with wanting to discover and be in relationship with another human being to find out what would serve them versus I'm trying to make money off of you. How did you know how to do that?
I didn't maybe in the beginning, right?
Okay.
And I think you just kind of learn it over the time. Now I've been blessed to have a lot of good mentors, right? And a lot of good people that trained me and a lot of good people I learned from osmosis. And I think you pick a little bit up. But I think some of it is hardwired, right? And I learned whenever I went with the me first attitude, the sale didn't happen. But whenever I went with the let's try to figure out who you are, where you want to go, and if products or services that I have can get you there, the sale then went better, right? So I think you just kind of come from that. You come from that position. And I think a lot of the archetypes that we were talking about maybe in the beginning of salespeople that the media perpetrate and that type of thing, are kind of the bro mentality or the beat my chest and I'm gonna beat have the person submit to my will, right? And I just don't think that works, and I don't think that's working today. And the world is short and small, and social media is too easy. So you want to do things right, and you want people walking away from interactions with you with a positive response versus a negative response.
Exactly. And I think that when I listen to you, it sounds like it's an invitation instead of a demand. It's like I'm inviting you into something that could serve you. And rather than I'm going to pressure you monetarily. I mean, you're moving it from relationship to a transaction rather than transactional without a relationship.
Right. And I know there's times, listen, you could sell a pen and it doesn't have to be a relationship given, right? Because it's just a commodity that somebody's
Right.
looking for to solve a problem. But then the bigger and deeper things, and some of our clients sell bigger and deeper things. We have to train them to that, and we have to teach them how to do that. And I was actually just before you and I got on, Suzanne, I was with one of my clients who I love dearly, and they do some great thing. But they were realizing that their messaging in the market that they were sending out there wasn't it became a little too salesy, right? It was a little too, in your face to who they were serving and how they sold. And so there was that disconnect in the marketplace. Well, the human brain is wired for safety, right? And if
Right.
you're like, this isn't a place for me, I'm gonna back off as a prospect, right? As a potential customer. So you kind of have to realize what is all my messaging and what is the environment that I want to go into. And then from there, you just, you're off to the races, right? And that's when the fun starts, when you start getting people that have an understanding of what you do and realize that you're coming from a place of grace and that you want them to be, you want to be successful. And the only way for them to be successful, or one of the only ways for them to be successful, is the implementation of your product or service. Then it's just a natural conversation, right? Then it's a natural byproduct. And sometimes we get, when we work with the artists, right? Or maybe we work with people that are in the health fields or different types of fields or the law fields, they think sales is beneath them and sales is a dirty thing. And so we kind of have to rewire their brain a little bit to say it's just an invitation for people to do business with you. Now, sometimes that, but you have to educate them and you have to ask the right questions. You have to come from a true north position, but it's just, it's just two humans trying to solve the problem.
We're back to invitation
Yeah.
versus imposition again,
Yeah.
right? You just
Yeah.
brought it out. And then also, you said something, you used the word grace and it slipped out of you. What does grace mean to you?
Well, I think grace is treating the other person as a human, right? Not just as a number or a conquest. So that's the first thing. I think grace is that you are gonna give the person time to make the right decision, right? You're going to give them some grace to process it. But I also think grace is you're going to hold yourself accountable and do what you're going to is supposed to do and get better at it so that the transaction is a positive transaction, right? So grace is, we got to give ourselves grace. I think we're too hard on ourselves, but we have to give grace to the process.
It's interesting because you said you think we're too hard on ourselves. And you also talked in the beginning about being trapped by negativity instead of being
Mhm. Yeah.
positive. And it seems like grace towards ourselves could possibly help us us out of the self negativity rut. And when I listen to you, I keep hearing or experiencing this feeling of positivity. Let's do something together, or just why not? There's a sense of why not with you. Like, why
Yeah.
not? Even when you talked in the beginning of like, we have gifts, empty your gifts. Like empty all that you have to give, leave it all out on the table. But how do you think you got there? Because it just comes out of you. And I don't know if it's your maturity or living life, but you have this, come on, let's go. We can do this positivity. What were you made this way, or did you grow into this, or both?
It's a great question, Suzanne. I think I had the benefit of growing up in a positive household, right? And I think our environment kind of sets the tone for the future for us. And certainly, the benefit of growing up in America, right? Certainly, the benefit of growing up in an affluent environment, right? Where education was really important. My mom was an educator. My dad felt education was very important for the children. So that where we moved to was for the good schools, but they were very positive on us, right? And I think there's a portion of that some people don't have the benefit of. And so I,
Right.
I want to realize that, listen, I got really lucky with that portion of it. And then, then the next part is the choice, right? Certainly we've all had trials and tribulations, and there's probably times where I wallowed in it a little bit, but you can't do that forever. So you kind of have to push yourself through. We've all had business deals that didn't go well, or businesses that didn't grow as fast as they could, or personal experiences that were negative. We could dwell in negativity or dwell on the positivity. Certainly spent a lot of time educating myself through the power of that, right? Through, you start out with the easy literature, right? The positive mental attitude literature, those type of things, but then you evolve. But I think it takes, one is, if you're lucky to be born into it, you have to force yourself to continue that, because it's easy to go negative. We talked a little bit about that. And I think the other thing too is you have to have to give grace. I know I use that term or phrase. You have
Mm.
to give thanks every morning, and I do. Right, the first morning, first thing I try to read is something from the Bible. It's my choice. All right, it's not that it's the right thing for everyone. It's just something to kind of ground myself and move forward with the day. And I have some phenomenal clients that are Orthodox Jews, right? And they take, they say their prayers every day at 2:20, right to 2:30. I think that practice is just fascinating. So, I've learned a lot from them and how they approach business and commerce, but also how they approach the family and the spiritual life. And I think we could spend a lot of time on that, right? And it's easy to scroll Facebook or Instagram, but maybe there's a better person that we should be scrolling. And if every person finds their own way and what's important to them and what's true to them. And so, that's it. I grew up, in a very religious Catholic environment, right? So that's always been part of us. The education that we had was around that, for the most part. So that was important to us, and that's myself and my family, and it's carried on through my life. Now, there's days I work on being better at it, and there's days I could be better at it, right? So I'm not perfect in any way, shape, or form. I'm human. And so I just kind of keep on keeping on. Long answer to a short question.
No, I'm fascinated by no matter what kind of inspiration or faith anyone might have, but to have something to anchor oneself in, maybe around gratitude, or maybe that's not the right word, but something that keeps our attention. I'm just going to use this word in something that's holy versus something that's worldly, to help us have access to something to remind us of the something more or possibility. I know before we got on, you were talking about possibility, like,
Sure.
but I'm hearing that to take the time to have either reflection or something that's inspiring to govern the day so that you're not just with your own mind or that those negative impulses is helpful. What do you think about what I'm saying here?
I think what you're saying is spot on, right? And I think the couple key words that I want everybody to remember is you have to take the time, right? And it might be 30 seconds, might be a minute, might be 2 minutes, right? Might be 10 minutes, but you just take the time and find out what speaks to you. What speaks to me may not be what speaks to
Right.
Suzanne, which might not speak to the listener, and that's okay. But it's the importance, and we talked a little bit about that, is we want companies to have missions, and we want governments to have missions, and we want to have social impact organizations or nonprofits to have missions. I think people have to have missions too, and families need to have missions too. And there's days that the family challenges the mission, right? If you've ever had children, it's not always perfect and sunshine and roses, right? And I think those are the times when you need to lean on that even more. Give your problems to a higher being, and you got to do the work, right? You have to do your part of the equation. It's not a one-way street, but I think there's something to that. You got to remember, we talked a little bit about it. You are put here for a reason. You have to kind of figure out what that reason is. Sometimes you figure that out through trial and error. And sometimes you just know, right? Some certain people intuitively know, I believe certain things are callings. I think the doctor knows from an early age, and I spent a lot of time in working with physicians and medical professionals, and I asked them, and they would always answer me that way. I think teachers know, right? It's innate in them. Maybe you, as a young person, had a teacher that inspired you, and you want to carry that through. So I think people in the arts that's just always at them, and they know that they need to get this art out, whether it's through song or painting or writing or something of that nature. You, as an author, probably knew you had to get those books into the world, and kind of forced you to type when you didn't want to type, and write when you didn't want to write, when you wanted to do something else. And so I think we have to listen to those callings. We have to listen to that internal, or the chatter that's in our minds, and what is it telling us to do. And sometimes you can only do it for a little bit. You can't stop everything. You got to pay the bills, right? We have we have roofs over our heads and mouths to feed. So you kind of have to do it. But that's what inspires me, right? The person I was just on a plane the other day. The woman was in her 60s and she just got her master's degree. She just finished. God bless. That was wonderful, right? She had to get her kids through school and get everything, but for her that was important. And I think she's going to be an inspiration to many as well as to her family. And so I think there's times that we have to listen, right? And then there's times we have to take action. And the listening part sometimes is harder than taking the action. But once you know where you got to go, you have to take the action.
There's two things I want to talk about. One is, how does one create their own personal mission
Sure,
statement?
sure.
That's one. The other thing is, sometimes I see people who are very gifted, but it's so familiar to them, they don't see it's a gift. And they take for granted something that's having a tremendous impact, but they're not emptying their tank with it because they don't see it. So those are two completely different directions. I'll let you pick which one you want to take, and I do want you to answer both.
I think the first one is the personal mission is I think you have to kind of spend some time on reflection, probably some time on journaling and writing. And there's some great books that, kind of talk you through this. I wouldn't attempt to know as much as, it's something as simple as Stephen Covey, but there's other great books out there that really help people kind of drive their personal mission. And I think you start with what are your values, right? There's a book, I think it's called The Value Guide or the Value Thing. And what are your values? And there's a list of all of them, and you kind of distill them down and then you say, okay, from those values, what are the core values, right? What are the three most important, two most important to me? And then how do I implement that into a vision, right? A mission
Mhm.
and my value statement. And I think it evolves, right? Susan, my mission statement, if I go back and read, journals that are over to the left of me, for my 20s, I laugh at myself now, right? Compared to now. And I think, that just changes. But there's probably some core things that are woven through over the decades. So I think that's the first thing and the first way. And the first draft is never the right draft. And you kind of carry with you and you read it and you think about it and you read it and you put it aside in a drawer and you pull it out and you read it and you implement it. So that's my take, right? Nick
Mhm.
Luisi's take. The second part is remind me of the second part just so I answer it correctly.
I will, but before we get to the second part, because I have it in my
Okay.
memory, I appreciate what you just said in terms of value based and allowing it to evolve over time and also shift and evolve and keep becoming so that,
Sure.
but there may be a core essence of values that is in the evolution of change. So
Mhm.
that's really, I think, really beautiful. And I also think that then it gives you a reference point, like what you were talking about. If you have that personal mission statement, then I can go, am I living that in this action? Am I choosing this? So it does give a reference point. So I just wanted to mark those two things. The other thing I was talking about was when sometimes for some people, when I've been coaching them, the impact that they're having from their innate gifts is invisible to them because it's
Oh, that's
so, it's so like they just do it so they don't think about it. And so then they don't maximize their influence because it's invisible to them.
I think how does one know, right? So
Mhm.
it's not invisible to them. I think the first thing you said is, I think everybody should have a coach, right? Even if it's for a short period of time, somebody like yourself or something else, somebody that could be objective, third party. We had coaches in school, we had coaches in sports, we had coaches in music and the arts, right? So it's an instructor or somebody that's there to kind of see and get the best out of us. So the first thing they should do is get a coach. And even if it's for a handful of
Mhm.
interactions, I'm fine with that. The second thing, and there's, you know, go out and ask people, what do you think I'm good at? Where do you see me?
Mhm.
Where do I excel? Where are my pitfalls? Where do you think that, I should be doing this? And that's an exercise of vulnerability because you're asking people to kind of rate you and give feedback on you, but you have to be open to that. And they're all going to come from a place of love. If you say, listen, I'm trying to figure this out, right?
Right.
And I think there was, a book, and maybe it's probably in the 80th, what color's my parachute, right?
Right.
And it was, that was the beginning of kind of like the 70s esque of, how do you find yourself or what you're supposed to do and that type of thing. But I think just going out and asking people and going out and asking people that you interacted with, or maybe you served on the committee or past bosses or that, sometimes maybe it's not best to ask the children, right? Because they always see the worst in us. We don't do that. But, I think that's the two ways to do that. And I think it's going to give you a basis, and you look for themes, right? Are there key
Mm,
words or key themes or key things that I'm hearing over and over and over again? No, that's somebody telling you something, right? And so you
mm.
need to act on that. So I think those are the two ways that I could think of. There's a
Good.
third way, and we talked a little bit about that. And I think it's the what am I supposed to do question,
Mm,
right? What am I supposed to do question? And sometimes it's not going to be answered immediately.
right.
And so you have to kind of do some stuff, and you're going to find it, I don't like doing this. That's not your calling. It's not your gift. And you try something else. You're like, oh, this is better. Right. And so I think a lot of times we go with an empty bucket, and that's not fair. We have to kind of go with a half full bucket and say, like,
Mm.
let me fill this up the rest of the way. And this is something I like to do.
Before we got on, you talked about not being one dimensional. Will you say a
Sure.
little bit more about that? And then we need to wind down.
I think we as humans and people need to be three-dimensional, right? Multi-dimensional. And sometimes we become one-dimensional
Mm,
because of the fact that it's just easier, right? We're one aspect of ourselves, but we need to kind of play the whole game of life and be multidimensional. And there's so many things that could grab our time and energy and our focus that cause us to be one dimensional because that's what they want. But if we go back and look and say, and there's times I do this. Listen, oh my gosh, I just spent 3 hours watching television. So I watch somebody else live out their best life by being an actor or being on a sports arena and that versus me living out my best life. Now,
mm,
maybe there was a time that I had to do that because I was sitting next to my family and we watched the movie and it was family life. Well, now I am living my best life, so I am being multidimensional. But so I think you need to ask yourself, who am I lifting up by doing this?
mm.
And if it's not yourself or you're the people around you that matter the most, then you got to stop doing it, right? And you got to figure out what gets me to be multidimensional. So, I mean, there's times that we're one, right? And there's times that we're two,
Mhm.
and there's times that we're three. And so I think it's just all about how can I live in that 3D all the time, that three-dimensional all the time
I love that. Thank you. I love to ask my guests before we wind down, what do you think the purpose for life is?
to live it.
Live it. Thank you. And how can people get a hold of you?
A number of different ways. They could go on our website. My core business is sales performance team. Our secondary business is your sales recruiter. They could go on there. They could hit me up on Facebook, right? I'm active on Facebook as Nicholas Loise, Loise, or on LinkedIn, right? Those are the socials. They could email me at nick@salesperformanceteam.com. Those are the easiest ways to get a hold of us.
Great. I love that. Thank you. I've so enjoyed having you on today. Thank you so much. Thank you, listeners, for joining Purpose for Life podcast. We love having you here. Subscribe and learn about the next one. And until next time, live your best life and live on purpose.